Hello and welcome to Awful Commentary. Today I want to talk about Batman: The Killing Joke. The Killing Joke was originally a graphic novel written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Brian Bolland in 1988, and is generally seen as one of the most highly regarded and also controversial Batman stories ever to be written. Alongside Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, The Killing Joke is seen as being part of a wave in the late 1980s of Batman graphic novels that seek to analyse and critique the character while revealing the latent darkness within. And it did this so successfully that despite being a heavily stylised one-off graphic novel, The Killing Joke was made part of the DC main continuity, almost against the publisher's wishes. Perhaps the most influential 48-page comic book in history, The Killing Joke has had lasting repercussions on the characters of Batman, the Joker, and perhaps most importantly Barbara Gordon, that can be felt within the books pretty much 30 years later. And after decades of screaming for some kind of on-screen adaptation, last month we finally got a cartoon version. After all this hype, I can hear you screaming, "What is this book even about?" And if you're thinking that and you haven't read it, why are you watching this video in the first place? Stop the video and go and read it. But if you're too lazy for that, then I guess I'll just explain it anyway, because DGAF. Batman goes to Arkham Asylum because he's decided that really it's time to just talk to the Joker. After years of battling and fighting, he thinks, if I can just go to him and end this feud that we've had going, then perhaps I can save both of our lives before one of us kills the other. But upon arriving at Arkham Asylum, he finds the Joker isn't even there. There's been a dummy put in his place, and the real psychopathic criminal is on the loose in Gotham. We cut to a nice domestic scene of Commissioner Gordon and his daughter Barbara, who are there sticking together a scrapbook of crime. When there's a knock on the door, Barbara opens it, only to find the Joker standing there with the gun raised. The Joker shoots Barbara several times in what is generally regarded as his most barbaric act in comics, kidnaps Commissioner Gordon, takes photographs of her while she's bleeding on the floor, and leaves her to die. We discover that the Joker's plan is to take Commissioner Gordon to a derelict amusement park that he bought previously in the comic, and by bought I mean killed the owners of, where he intends to drive the Commissioner to the point of insanity and prove that anyone, no matter how sane they may appear to be, can go mad from just one bad day. Interwoven with this cruelty and horror is an origin story for the Joker. Harking back to a story from the 1950s, we see that Joker was not always the clown prince of crime. In fact, at one point, he was a criminal known as the Red Hood. But whereas in the 1950s the Red Hood was seen to be some master criminal, instead what we see is a man who was down on his luck, who can't hold a job, whose pregnant wife ends up dying, and is just driven insane when Batman accidentally forces him into a vat of acid. The Joker's point here then is that when your wife and unborn child die in the same day that you get pushed into a vat of chemicals by a man dressed as a flying rodent, you kind of got a right to go a bit crazy. And as he thinks that Batman at some point suffered the same kind of trauma as he did, his belief is that should Commissioner Gordon, the one sane man who holds Gotham together, come over to their side, the crazy side, then he'll have won. The book ends with a climactic fight in the amusement park where Commissioner Gordon shows that he's retained his sanity, and when Batman finally captures the Joker, he tells a joke. Now, I'm not going to tell the joke, because if I deliver it and you don't laugh, then I've ruined the entire thing. So I'm going to let you go and read the joke instead. But what's really important about it is that when the Joker tells the joke, as an audience we look at it and we think, well, that's not very funny. I mean, what I've just read is utterly horrific. Why would I possibly be laughing at this? But Batman does laugh. In fact, Batman laughs at the joke so much that he appears to have to hold himself up on the Joker's shoulders as police cars roll in to arrest him and take him away. Now, The Killing Joke has a lot of themes and ideas that I'm just not going to have time to delve into in this video. But what is important is that most of these themes are perceived by the Joker himself. The Joker believes that he and Batman are essentially one and the same, that they are two sides of the same coin. The Joker confounds Commissioner Gordon with ideas of what sanity is, whether it's actually better to be insane than normal like everybody else. And perhaps most importantly of all, it deals with the idea of differing realities. Although we're given a relatable backstory for the Joker, the character himself says that if I'm going to have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice. Now, something to remember going forward is that despite all the horrible, terrible stuff that happens in The Killing Joke, there is one event that has never failed to cause controversy, and that is the attack on Barbara Gordon. It's used as a key example of women in refrigerators, an argument named after the events of the comics of Green Lantern Kyle Rayner. The argument being there are far too many women in comics who are injured or killed because of the emotional effects it will have on male characters. Alan Moore himself has said that looking back on The Killing Joke, he doesn't like it anymore. He feels now that it's too sexualized and the violent is, well, too violent. In terms of the book, I generally tend to disagree with this. One of the main undercurrents of The Killing Joke is about what happens to you when you lose those closest to you, when you lose your family. Joker references losing his wife and his unborn child. He says the Batman is the way he is because of the terrible things that happened to him, because he lost his family. And his attempt to turn Commissioner Gordon, he does by attacking Gordon's family. It's just kind of particularly unfortunate now, when we look back at it, that the writers have kind of painted Alan Moore into a corner by saying, oh, well, the rest of the Gordon family doesn't really matter, it's just Barbara. I also feel like the attack on Barbara is something that isn't aimed at our protagonist. If Batman is the protagonist of The Killing Joke, which I'm not even sure he is, mostly it's a Joker story. But if Batman is the protagonist, then the attack on Barbara Gordon has no intention of affecting him, simply because there is no reference to her being Batgirl within the comic, and even if there was, the Joker doesn't know her secret identity. The one thing that is really important to remember about The Killing Joke is that despite being the most horrible thing in it, the attack on Barbara Gordon is not the focal point of the comic. Certainly, it's the inciting incident that gets the story going, but when Batman confronts Joker at the end of the book, they never even mention it to each other. So when the animated adaptation was announced, everybody knew there was just one thing that they couldn't mess up. There was just one thing that needed to be handled with a degree of sensitivity. And what did they do? They made things worse. If you remember my description of the plot from The Killing Joke, you'll know that actually the book's not that long. As I said, it's only 48 pages. In fact, she narrates the first half of the story. It's only when The Killing Joke actually begins that she stops. And what this does is it makes her the protagonist of the story. Batman is not the main character. The Joker is not the main character. It's Batgirl's story arc who we are supposed to be following, and we're never told when that stops. And in story terms, the paralysing of your protagonist is pretty much the worst thing that can happen. So later on, where Commissioner Gordon is stripped naked, chained like a dog, whipped by evil circus freaks, none of that matters because it's not the focal point of the story. Visually, what happens to Commissioner Gordon is more traumatising than what happens to Batgirl, but that's not important because we are told that she is the main character. And sexualising a female main character who you intend to cripple because of her relationship to the hero, that's not right. Now, it's worth stating that in the animated version of The Killing Joke, once the original story actually kicks in, it's an almost panel-for-panel adaptation. Any problems you have with the second half of the film are also probably problems that you would have reading the book. And in movie terms, generally, you're looking at around 1 page a minute. But considering in comics you're looking at something a bit quicker than that, if you did a straight adaptation of The Killing Joke, it would only be between 30 to 40 minutes long. But that wasn't enough for the makers of The Killing Joke. Oh no, they wanted to make it over an hour. So what we see is a story that is split into 2 halves. The second half is a near straight adaptation of The Killing Joke. The first half is a prequel story about Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. Now, instantly, that raises some concerns, because, as I was saying before, Barbara Gordon isn't actually the focus of The Killing Joke. By giving her a prequel to the events, you're highlighting who she is, saying why she's important, so that when she is attacked, we then get that emotional response to her character. Now, the intention there is understandable. The comic assumes you already know who Barbara Gordon is, but the animation doesn't have to take that risk. The problem is they instantly introduce 2 different romance subplots. The first one is a psychopathic, Joker-esque gangster who is a direct copy of Lad Russo from Baccano. If you haven't watched Baccano, watch The Killing Joke, then watch it and you'll go, oh shit, they are exactly the same. The second romance is with Batman. Now, this instantly brings some pretty serious questions to the forefront. Batgirl says that she's been doing this for around 3 years. As we know, most of Batman's protégés start out as teenagers, which puts her somewhere between the ages of 18 and 21. As well as that, if you do know the character of Barbara Gordon, then you understand her relationship with the Robins, how she was dating Dick Grayson for a long time, and how Batman generally views them all as his children. So when he tells Batgirl to stay away from Lad Russo from Baccano, she explodes with fury about how he's being overprotective, like a parent would be. He explains that her relationship to this villain is getting personal, and how, when they get personal, things tend to get bad. The Joker. He's referencing the Joker. What follows is the most awkwardly done sex scene that I think I have ever seen in cinema. Barbara Gordon has been saying to her colleague, whose only characterization is that he's supposed to be gay, he says one sentence and you understand that he's a gay character, that she's been dating some guy from her yoga class. What she really means is crime fighting. She says that they're in some kind of romance, but that never comes across. Instead, what does come across is that she's desperate to sleep with Batman and that really, she's just a little bit crazy. After they have sex, they become distant, and Batgirl instantly becomes this weak, clingy, very, very awkward character. By the end of it, she understands what Batman was trying to protect her from. She realizes that he was right all along and then turns in her Batgirl costume. And all of a sudden, the women in refrigerators thing becomes true. At the beginning of the story, we have a strong female character who stands side by side with one of the most important heroes on the planet. By the end of the first half, she's given up because their relationship is too complicated, and then 10 minutes later, she's shot in the spine. This shifts the focus of the story from being about the relationship between Batman and the Joker, from being about the relationship between Barbara Gordon and Commissioner Gordon, to instead being about Batman and Batgirl. Because of this, the sexualization of the attack that the Joker commits, that before people were reading into it, is brought right to the front. It's no longer an attack on the Gordon family, it's an attack on Batman's love life. As you can watch it, you can almost see Kyle Rayner reading the note that says, "I left you something in the fridge," and then he opens it up and his girlfriend's dismembered and he's like, "No," and you're like, but we've only known her for 3 issues, why did she die so quickly? Just to bring more attention to the one scene later on in which he is attacked, the film opens with a narration from Barbara Gordon saying, "Well, I bet you didn't expect it to start like this." It really is in this new prequel element where the story falls apart. The designers and the animators seemingly forget the aesthetic of the original piece. Brian Bolland's artwork is specifically designed to be a twist on the 1950s Batman. The design of the Batsuit, the design of the Batmobile, Barbara Gordon's librarian wear, even the Joker's Hawaiian shirt are supposed to reference the 1950s. This of course being because it was in the 1950s the Joker's origin as the Red Hood was originally told. In the adaptation, they give Batman the 1950s Batsuit, but then give Batgirl her modern-day paramilitary body armor. The Killing Joke all takes place in darkness, but the prequel keeps fluctuating between day and night. And perhaps most importantly is just a lack of consistency. It is painfully obvious that Batman was written by one writer for the first half and one writer in the second half. And it is bizarre to start character flashbacks when you're moving into the third act of your film. It puts the audience in this strange position where you're trying to build tension coming up to the climax of the movie, and you keep cutting back to before he was even the Joker. And don't get me wrong, that is one of the most interesting and integral parts to The Killing Joke, but it just seems as if in the movie they haven't thought it through. The book is about a lunatic who is trying to show that even the best of us, deep down, are just like him, something that was dealt with in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. The animated adaptation of The Killing Joke is about predator and prey and obsession in a way that is not uncomfortable in the way you would want the Joker to make you uncomfortable, but in a way that just makes you feel a bit seedy for watching. In general though, the voice acting is good. Kevin Conroy seems to find it a little bit difficult to pick up the monologues after doing the earlier gruffer Batman, but that's fine, and Mark Hamill is always great as the Joker, even if I was kind of surprised about how flat he was in the flashbacks. So that's my thoughts on The Killing Joke. I think it's one of those examples where trying to force in some kind of backstory actually takes away from the original rather than enhancing it. But if you guys are unsure, I encourage you to go and watch the cartoon to definitely read the book. And if you can't quite make up your mind which one is better, then I would suggest watching the cartoon from the point where the original Killing Joke starts. In the cartoon, there's a moment where Batman walks into a shadowy room and there's a bunch of Joker corpses. That's basically the beginning of The Killing Joke from there. If you do decide to start watching it there, try and think, is it better now that I don't have all of this stuff before? Am I actually losing anything by not knowing stuff about Barbara Gordon? And if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. Thank you for joining us on Awful Commentary. We hope to see you again soon.